Hey, good afternoon. How's lunch, everyone? Good? Well, welcome back to the desert of the real. Today, what I want to talk to you about, and we'll just let people trickle back in, that's cool. I want to talk about native development for the Apple Vision Pro. I was just told recently, probably most of you are Unity people, and most of the people who come to AWE are Unity people, right? So I really want to make a good case to you about why you want to do some investment in learning how to develop natively and get all the equipment, put down the money and so on in order to basically learn iOS development even though you have no interest in developing for iPad or iPhone or anything like that, right? Okay, so who am I? My name is James Ashley. I've spent about 9 months so far developing for Vision OS. I currently work at CVS Healthcare Innovation Labs, trying to figure out new ways of using the Vision Pro in the healthcare space. And before that, I can't talk about the exact dates for various reasons, but I was working at Walmart Store 8, which was Walmart's innovation group. And we'd put together an enterprise project for Walmart. I led the engineering that basically helped people organize store shelves, which is a big deal in the big box market. And what was exciting about that is we got it out in about 2.5 months. It was very intense, and Tim Cook ended up really liking it and kept talking about it in different broadcasts about how whenever anybody asked him about, what's interesting in the enterprise, he'd go, oh yeah, that Walmart app is awesome. And privately, we'd all cheer like this, And the other thing I'm doing is I'm working with Farhan in the front here with XR Bootcamp, trying to put together some master classes around Vision Pro development with a special emphasis on helping Unity devs who already understand spatial concepts pretty well, just sort of master the iOS side of things. I think it's not too hard. There are challenges. It's weird, but there are just a lot of analogs. So we already published one course, which is called, what do we call it, Swift Development for Unity Devs, just to show how many similarities there are between Swift and C#, between, let's say, Xcode and Visual Studio, between Reality Composer Pro and the Unity IDE. And I think just with that sort of exposure, everyone will eventually feel a lot more comfortable with it. And the important thing to know is I've been a Unity developer forever. I started off, everybody's got a number, right? That year when you first got hooked on AR. So I remember mine, it was late 2015 when I sat my wife down and said, honey, I need to take $3,000 out of our savings and buy a HoloLens, and it'll pay for itself, just trust me. This is gonna be the future. Yeah. So I won't say I never looked back, but I've just kept going forward. After HoloLens, it was the Magic Leap. And because of the Magic Leap, it was HoloLens 2, then Magic Leap 2. And I ended up being in the right place at the right time at Walmart when Vision OS came along. And probably a big question people have, especially if you're business people, is what sort of the investment, what does it take to build a project? So I'll throw some numbers, I'll be a little vague, but I led a team of 6 engineers. We had 3 designers. We had 2 QA people. We had 3 directors and a VP who, because it was a high-profile project, right? So we had more directors on the project than we had QA people, obviously. And when we finally got devices, we were able to do it with just 2 devices that we would share between all of the different teams. And that worked out pretty well. So there is a lean way of doing major application development, even for the enterprise, around the Vision Pro. Just want you to know that. Okay, so the first one, especially if you're a Unity developer, why would you do native, right? It's the Apple world. Probably you've spent many years having private jokes over dinner about how you never want to do Apple development. You just want to do AR headset development or something, right? And suddenly Apple's thrown this thing in front of you where the future of headset development is actually going to require you to learn some Apple stuff. So an easy way of getting around that would be going with Unity, right? Unity is a fantastic game engine. It's been around forever. It's been, 9, 10 years. HoloLens embraced Unity early. Magic Leap did the same thing. So if you've been doing AR headsets, we're calling it spatial computing now, right? If you're doing spatial computing development, it's amazing how many former HoloLens developers are calling them spatial computing people too, right? But anyways, if you're doing that, then you're used to Unity, and that's where all the 3D concepts come in, and that's sort of your strength as a developer who's been through all of that. So what I'm going to try to explain to you is why you might want to go to native Vision OS development. Your other options, of course, are WebXR. WebXR is fantastic, and we'll have the next speaker try to make the case for why WebXR would be a really good platform to work on. And then there's Unreal Engine. Basically, everybody knows that Unreal's working on this, but every time they release something, it's not really there. And maybe, to me, it's kind of where Unity was, let's say 9 months ago, when they had early releases for Vision OS 2, and it was really hard to get it to work. And they've been cranking away to the point where it's pretty decent now. And maybe Unreal Engine will be at that point in 5 more months, and we can have this conversation again. But for now, I think the real two choices are native development or Unity development. Okay, so it's worth making the case for Unity first, and explain why Unity is so important in this world. The first thing is that everyone who's been developing for the HoloLens or the Magic Leap or the Meta are almost, let's say 95%, they've been doing it in Unity. It's a great tool. People have learned it. You've got a big body of developers out there who know how to do headset development with Unity, and that's important. Then you've got all these ancillary frameworks, right? OpenXR and MRTK, and we can talk about them being, cross-platform, but really they're kind of Unity platforms at this point, right? And so if you start with Unity, there's always a promise that you can be cross-platform with other things that come along later. So that's a great reason for using Unity also. Spatial computing on Unity has been around since 2016, which means they know a lot of the ins and outs, and they have a lot of knowledge on board about doing spatial computing with Unity. They've got the expertise, which is great. And by comparison, we can say, obviously, Apple's been working on Vision OS for a long time, but it only really got released around 2023, right, at DubDub last year. I didn't know it was called DubDub. I always said it the longer way, WWDC, but now I say DubDub. Okay, so how do you choose between Unity and Vision OS? Well, here's the easy case. If you're porting an iPad app, you really should be using Xcode and the native tools, right? Because basically, you hardly have to do anything. You open up Xcode, you check an extra box that says, I also want this deployed to Vision OS, and suddenly it's there. Chef's kiss to that. On the other hand, there are tons of Unity apps out there that have been written for the Magic Leap and the HoloLens 2, and the Magic Leap 2, and the Meta. And if your idea is you really want to get an app up and running quickly, the best thing to do is just port it. And if you can do it with Unity, you should do it with Unity. But that's the easy case, right? Here's the harder case. When you have to choose between the two, probably your biggest problem is you've got a bunch of developers and they're all Unity developers. So how do you make the hard case to them that they have to learn this whole new language where instead of being the kings of their domains, right, the absolute experts of their world, they get to be noobs again and have to learn a whole new language? That's a tough thing to do. So here's a few reasons. One is all the Apple tools and Vision OS tools are built for Vision OS development, right? You've got Swift and Swift UI, and you've got Xcode, and you've got Reality Composer Pro. Reality Composer Pro wasn't even used until Vision OS came along. So they've developed a whole tool ecosystem around doing this. And one of the things that's really important to me is just the look of it. If you're building something for an Apple platform, it should look like an Apple app, right? And I think everybody knows if you build something in Unity, it does not look like an Apple app at all, right? So I think Unity is giving support. You can make your app look kind of like an Apple app and not like the weird canvases that are blue and everything. But it takes a lot of extra work, and as we all know with developers tend to be a little bit lazy, right? That'll be the last thing that they want to do, make their application look good for Apple consumers. So that's a really high-level case for using the native tools first. Another really good reason is that, obviously, if you're using the Apple platforms, you receive all the new features and the new APIs first. Unity has to come in after the fact and build on top of it. And so we just got a bunch of announcements now about visionOS 2.0. Who knows, maybe 2 or 3 months it's going to come out. But even when that happens, Unity has said they're going to support visionOS 2, and it looks really fantastic. But there's a tendency that that's going to slip to the end of the year because they promised 2024, which means that last possible day of 2024 is when we're going to get that. So that's another reason for doing native first. Documentation and learning. Apple's out there providing plenty of documentation tools, and they know that they have this education mission to teach people how to do visionOS development. They've got fantastic sample apps. I think for Unity, where the resources on this project are much tighter, that's going to be trickier. You're going to kind of depend on going to the Unity forums when you have a very difficult conversion problem and just seeing if anybody else there is even doing the same thing that you are, and usually they aren't. So that's a sort of development buggy trouble that is not very pleasant. So you're going to get a lot better support and documentation if you're doing visionOS first. Another really tricky problem, and this depends on where you are sort of financially. Are you a big enterprise or are you a small startup or a lone developer? Is you can't even do the visionOS SDK for Unity unless you pay for a $2,000 a year pro license, right? So that's a huge tax on this. I understand why Unity does it because they've got to do a huge investment in creating all of these ports that you build an app for Unity, and then it all gets converted and recompiled to sit on top of RealityKit. That ain't cheap and it isn't easy, but on the development side, it's kind of tricky to want to pay another $2,000 a year for that license, especially when you're also paying for a new MacBook and a developer license and things like that. Another one, again, I want to say, first of all, I think Unity is just an amazing company, and it's fed my family for, the last 9 years or so, right? So I have nothing but gratitude to them, but Unity can be kind of unsettled at times. We know with their various frameworks like dots and things like that, things are coming out and then they don't come out and then they do come out again. And so they miss their dates a lot. And especially right now, with the various layoffs and stuff, I would say I'm not totally comfortable in putting all my eggs in the Unity basket at this point in time. Because I don't know if if things are going to get settled soon or not. I'm sure they will. Another thing is understanding how Unity is doing all of this. Unity is basically compiling this, everything to RealityKit, and that's how HoloLens development used to be, right? You develop in Unity, and then you'd push a button. Instead of getting an app, you would get a Visual Studio project, and then you'd have to do another hop. And it's not quite like that. It's actually easier for the visionOS, but it's a similar thing. So it's never going to be the case, as far as I know, that you're going to be able to do something in Unity that you aren't able to do in visionOS. And it's probably always going to be the case that there are some things you're able to do very easily in visionOS, but it's going to be a lot trickier if you're going from Unity to RealityKit to deployment. And then the final thing, which I mentioned in the previous slide, is that porting iOS tablet apps, iPad apps, is just so easy if you already are comfortable with SwiftUI and Xcode and so on. Here's some reasons for not using visionOS. The first one is there are a lot of great apps out there, a lot of great developers who already know Unity. People should leverage those people and those skills in that code base if you can. Another really important is Unity has had, let's say, 8 or 9 years of experience, and you've got the ecosystem around doing spatial computing on Unity. That seems like something that should be leveraged too, or at least it would hurt to give that up. And the really important reason, I think the reason that compels a lot of people is making decisions is, learning Apple development adds a lot of additional friction when all you really want to do is build an app, right? You've got to build in the time to train these people on what initially is going to be a very uncomfortable platform. Another really important thing about the pros and contras, though, are it kind of depends on who you are. If you're an indie developer, let's say, where you're building your own app or you're waiting for the enterprises to start hiring people, you got to be really cost conscious. And in order to go all in on Vision OS development, well, actually, it's true for the Unity side too. You actually do need a MacBook Pro in order to develop for Unity for Vision OS. So that's $2,000, $2,500 right off the top. But then if you're indie, it really kind of hurts to, on top of that, also have to pay another $2,000 for your Pro license, right? If you're in corporate development, you tend to have more funds or it's easier to justify it. So if you've got 6 developers, you probably can pull off buying 6 MacBook Pros for your developers and licenses and so on. So it's a different story altogether. And the people I feel a lot of sympathy for is the people in between who are agencies, right? Where you've got 6 developers and a designer, say, but your money is eventually going to come from the enterprise. You want to set yourself up to be building applications for really big companies like Target or IKEA or something like that. And so you've got to put down all this money first. You've got to decide how to train up your developers to go ahead and do Vision OS development on Xcode and so on, even though you don't necessarily have the money coming in yet. Okay, so let's talk brass tacks here. Here's the cost of becoming a Vision OS developer. First of all, you need an Apple developer membership, and that's $99 right off the top. Then you need a MacBook Mini, Mac Mini or a Mac Studio, and it has to have a Silicon chip, which means the M1, M2, M3, or M4 level chips. So if you've got an old Mac with an Intel chip in it, that's just not going to work for you. Okay, and plus if you're going to buy a Mac, you kind of want a really nice one, right? You want that M4 Max if you can. The other big thing, this is free though, with your Apple developer membership, you need to get comfortable and install Xcode and Reality Composer Pro, which are the 2 big tools that you're going to be using in order to do Vision OS native development. And then the things you always sort of have to bear in mind, and I keep harping on this, is that $2,000 a year Unity Pro license. And the other thing, who's it, Andy this morning, I think, was explaining all about the new enterprise features, and you need to request permission from Apple in order to get access to, say, the camera, which is fantastic. Before you can even ask permission from Apple to do that, you actually need an enterprise membership and not just a regular developer membership. And to get the enterprise license, you need to have a company with 100 people, right? So they're making it a little bit tough. I understand why they're doing it, because they're very nervous about privacy. But again, if you're an indie developer, you don't have a chance there. And if you're a small studio, it becomes very difficult for you also. You have to actually get a client first, get the client to get the enterprise license and get them to add you to it, just so that you can have access to that camera buffer on the Apple Vision Pro. Okay, next thing to know, and this is just sort of a language thing. In Unity, you use the Unity IDE and you use the Visual Studio usually as your code editor. On the Apple side, you need Xcode and you need Reality Composer Pro. Once you can go to the developer site, once you get your $99 developer membership, and just download those to your brand new M3 Mac. Other terms that you really need to know, and this is if you're going out and hiring people or figuring out what you need to train people on, is Swift is the equivalent of C#. That's the language you're going to be developing on. Swift UI is a framework for building 2D interfaces, and that's what all your iPhones and iPad apps is built with. And there's a 2D component in Vision OS that works very nicely. But finally, Reality Kit is the other tool. This would be sort of equivalent to the Unity IDE to the extent that it allows you to work with 3D models and move them around inside a scene and play the animations and see what it looks like. So again, if you start from Unity, it's a whole different lexicon of words that you have to deal with and dig into and understand what you need to know about it. Okay, and here's the final case. Let's say that you've already decided that's all too much trouble. We have Unity developers and we've got a Unity project that we're just going to port. So we're not going to look at Xcode or Swift and Reality Kit. And I would still encourage you, if you've got that much extra time, let's say you've got a 3-month project of just porting your Unity project, get your people to learn the new tools anyways, because remember, you're compiling a Unity project to Swift and Reality Kit. you can actually go into those projects and make changes to it if you need to. So it's very good to understand what the product is, the outcome of your Unity project that you're going to be deploying. It's going to help you debug. And in the long run, as business people, you're going to want to go to your customers and be able to explain to them why you're building their project in Unity rather than something else. And that requires some base knowledge about what's going on in the native Vision OS side. Okay, so the other really important thing, if this helps you make your decisions, is learning. So best place to learn is Apple Developer Documentation. It's fantastic, but especially the sample code. They've got, I think, 7 sample projects now that you can just download and walk through the code to try to understand better what's going on and what the best practices are. And they're doing heavy documentation, and as far as I can tell, they're constantly working away with it, working away at it. Another really good source is Codeco, which has always done really good learning resources for iOS development. And they're starting some Vision OS lessons, which I think are really good, and they're doing a workshop also. And the final one is XR Bootcamp. I work with XR Bootcamp, just came out with a course for them on Swift for Unity developers. And we're going to put together a couple of masterclasses, one for native development and one for Unity development, to really try to help everybody get up to speed so that we can take, you know, our XR and our spatial computing to the next level for everybody, whatever tools you're using. And yeah, you can find me online as James Ashley 1 on GitHub, James Ashley on LinkedIn, and you can go to my website at imaginaveuniversal.com. Thank you so much for listening to me, and I want to take any questions you might have now. And, okay. Hey, Steve.
Hey, James. Thank you for that. That was a really, really nice overview. Question about Reality Kit versus Unity. I've heard that they have a different set of capabilities and things that if you're going to approach a project and look at the complexity of, say, an existing Unity scene and you're going to go to Reality Kit, what should you expect is, say, the upper limit of complexity you can expect in comparison to building a Unity scene, for example?
Yeah, I would say in general, Unity is the more mature game engine, right? Apple's still playing catch up with the enterprise announcements. They just added a bunch of things where I thought, oh yeah, that's that thing in Unity I really love, and I'm glad they've got it in there, like the timelines and better animations and things like that. So I would say in terms of complexity, you can do a lot more with the Unity IDE, but Apple's working on it. And there's also something nice about working with a new platform that's not cluttered with, let's say, 15 years of old architecture that they just can't abandon.
Thanks, James. And
thank you.
Really glad to see you keeping at this all this time.
It's good to see you.
Hi, my name is Joseph. I had a question. I've been doing Unity development for a long time and started in the mobile space. And you know, iOS was a big component of that. Back in the day, it was you had to roll your own Objective-C or Swift,
Yeah.
like kind of glue layers, if you wanted some native functionality that you couldn't get in Unity. Do you think that's still viable in the state of Unity and the state of like Apple's ecosystem moving forward?
I mean, it's viable if that's the way you like to program. You can do, as far as I know, you can still do Objective-C for your Vision OS apps if you want to. You can go to Metal, which is another way. I never go down to that level. I haven't found a need yet. But that's always something that distinguishes you as an engineer, right? If you can do really hard tasks that other people can't do because you can go into the Objective-C, that's a great thing.
I just mean it doesn't have to be Objective-C.
But you don't have to. But you totally
I just
don't
mean
have
like
to.
making that like kind of just like a single glue file that exposes the API that Unity's still working on releasing the package for.
Oh, I actually have no idea, and I couldn't say. This sort of like hacks while you're waiting for Unity to catch up, right? Don't know.
Oh, thanks.
I'm sorry.
You answered my question. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, James. That was a great presentation. It was worth the whole thing being here for that. I have one question. You mentioned that the Unity is on top of, you know, the native solution. So my question is, do you get more power? Can you push the device further if you're going native instead of using Unity? I noticed that there's a video bitrate limit when you're putting it in through Unity. It doesn't seem to be there on just native applications on the system. Do you know that? Is that a hunch, or is that true that you can get a little bit more power out of the device, push things a little bit further in terms of performance?
Yeah. I would say it's a hunch. And even when I would talk to Apple people and ask them that question straight out, they would always be a little bit cagey about it, right? It's
Okay.
just, that's kind of the assumption everybody has.
Okay.
Nobody
But no
has a particular case where they can say, you know, this gives you a 5% better performance.
Okay.
But I think it's just a hunch that everybody has right now.
What I've seen on the video bit rate is it is significantly more, but I don't know about that for all the cases. Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Hey, Jared.
Hey, James. So licensing-wise, I understand the engineering that Unity put in for the polyspatial stuff. Doesn't seem like that actually needs to be there for immersive mode. And then as other engines come out, do you think there will be pressure at all on licensing, on Unity to make a more cost-effective way of getting on the platform?
Yeah, so about the full immersive, there was a time when you could do full immersive and you didn't need the pro license.
Yes,
that
there
time
was.
is gone. Right now what happens is when you include the components and you press play, suddenly, even if you're doing a full immersive app, a VR app, right, those components just disappear off your system because you're not licensed to use them. So that's the current state. I think they're just facing the problem that it's very expensive to do this kind of development. They really want to do it, but they have to fund it somehow. I know a lot of people are complaining about it, but it may be well, we have Unity people here, so we can just ask them, right?
Yeah.
I shouldn't make something up.
Okay, what would you say is the third option? Do you see WebXR coming along more, or Unreal coming along more? Where would you go if you had to go for a third?
Yeah, if you have to do a third, then WebXR is working now. There's, you know, you have to go through hoops in order to get it working the way you want. You don't automatically get the App Store or anything like that. But that's absolutely a viable solution. Unreal Engine, like I said, probably we'll have to wait 5 months and see what they do. But they seem very serious about it, and they seem not to be sweating about cash at all. So,
Cool.
yeah.
Thanks.
I think that's all. Thank you very much, everyone. Just grab me in the hall if you want to have a conversation. Thank you.